Good evening. My name is Anthony Jones, and I'll be answering the question today on session two, uh, case 4.2, the Hershey Trust. You are a member of either the Hershey board or a trustee of the Hershey Trust. Give your perspectives on the argument of whether or not to buy Cadbury. What are the critical financial and ethical factors for which you are accountable? Obviously, I don't need to restate the case because you're familiar with that, sir. But to me, this was fairly easy. You have a company that is in Hershey that is not able, that got blocked from trying to sell the company by the courts because of the residual effects that it will cause within the community, and have been told that you will have to keep your company, for lack of better words. There's a few things that I have to assume. One, the strategic vision of this organization, of the trustees that um, come into play, and two, their decision making ability. A lot of the intangibles that I think are very important when making a decision of this magnitude. And one, I take into consideration that the trustees saw well in advance that the Hershey, um, I'm going to just state my position. You have to sell, or excuse me, you have to buy Cadbury. And the reason that you have to buy Cadbury is, like I was saying before, is that the trustees saw a way ahead of time the decline of the Hershey company. They saw that this was coming, which led them to try to sell the company. And then they were then blocked from that. And then another opportunity came up to where they could say, hey, look, since we can't sell this company, what we can do is try to buy a larger one. And yes, that will put us in a financial debt. And yes, that will require us to take massive monies out and have larger loans that could potentially hurt our stock. But in this, it could be a take a step back in order to take two steps forward. As we both know, that when they did not do this, their company continued to go down, down, and they continue to lose revenue. Um, Seeing as how some of the things that they saw, I look at that as having strategic foresight, and they saw what was coming. And therefore, you have to be willing to step out on a limb, and you have to be willing to step out and say, hey, look, we need to do something different because the current course we're on right now is not working. I think of companies like Kodak that failed to see the power curve coming ahead. And therefore, since they didn't stay up on the times, they went out of business. Think about companies like Xerox. Think about companies like Blockbuster that were giants in their particular time, but because of lack of strategic foresight, companies like Netflix and Amazon that did different things caught up with these companies, surpassed them, and then put them out of business. Um, and to me, being familiar with those organizations, I see the same type of traits that the Hershey Company and the trustees had by saying, we see a problem and we need to correct it. And they just didn't have the backing, and they didn't have people on their side. I can understand the court's decision to say, hey, look, this is going to be a big deal in our residential area. People are going to lose jobs. It's going to severely cripple the landscape and the environment that's here. That I can understand. And obviously, you have to be accountable for that because I'm sure all the economics and the political factors that go into that. And, there's a lot of competing interests at that level. Um, but to then say we have another course that we could take later on in the future, yes, it may set us back. And yes, it may put us in debt for a little bit. But this is a way um, to us to make progress and to keep people here and to keep us productive and to keep our school system and our trust to get it to build more value. To me, I just put so much stock in that strategic foresight, and that's what they had. And unfortunately, people didn't side with them. So we have to be willing to take chances. We have to be willing to If I'm a member on a trustee, I fight for. We have to be willing to take chances. We have to be willing to think ahead. We have to be willing to come up with a game plan, put the game plan down on paper, and move forward with the game plan. And more importantly, you know, me personally as a trustee, understanding the temperament of the room, there's a level of faith that has to be involved in this. Now, obviously, as being a believer, we can't, maybe talk with everybody about that. Not everybody will agree to the certain level of what you might have as far as being a believer. But if I'm just talking secular, you have to be willing to step out and weigh all your options. And when one option was stopped by the court system, then the next option would be we have to take a bigger risk, but the bigger risk is for the people because we know this. If we don't take this risk, it's not going to get any better. We know that. And so, therefore, based on the story that we've read right here, is that the best option at this time would be to go ahead and buy Cadbury. And this is why we need to buy Cadbury. And this is going to be the results of what we do. Yes, we'll be behind, but ultimately we'll get jobs. Ultimately, our company will become stronger, become larger. We'll go international like what we were trying to do. We'll block some of our competitors because our competitors are trying to, Wrigley, or actually trying to get the company as well. So we get a lot of wins with this, but we don't get wins by not taking any chances. Um, Once again, you can ask Blockbuster that. You can ask Kmart that. You can ask all these different companies that. So you have to be able to do that. And for that reason alone, Cadbury should have been a buy, even though it's going to set you back. That's my argument. That's how I feel about that. A lot of things I think are intangible, based on intangibles, the feel for the room and things that you just can't measure. Influence, articulation, your oratory skills, and your command presence of the room, of how this conversation could come across to other people. So I'm definitely on the board of trustees and I'm definitely in favor of buying Cadbury. I'm Anthony Jones, talking for session two on case 4.2, the Hershey Trust. Thank you for your time.